everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Prioritising at Transformation Level. This is unfortunately the last session of our series of webinars for Customer Centricity Month 2023. And before we get started, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming along and joining us at these sessions. It's been really great to see so many of you over the last few weeks. So while people are still joining, I just want to say hi and give a bit of an overview of what Customer Centricity Month actually is. This also might be the fifth time that some of you have heard this, so apologies for that. So I'm Lauren. I work in the marketing and events team at CXPartners, and at CXPartners, we work with organizations to drive growth, unlock opportunities, and enable teams to work together more effectively. We do this through our research programs, through user-centered design, and by embedding a culture of customer centricity within organizations. So last year, we started Customer Centricity Month as a way of creating dedicated content that's all about the value of user-centered design and putting customers at the heart of your organization. This year, we've been running the series again, but focusing on how customer centricity can make organizations more resilient and enable them to thrive when the external conditions make it challenging. This focus came from some research we conducted earlier in the year into how turbulent environments may affect organizations and their ability to remain customer-centric. We've recently published a white paper with these findings, so I'll send a link to where you can download that from at the end of the session. So in today's session, our speakers are Amanda Payne and Brian Moss. So Amanda is the Experienced Strategy Director here at CXPartners. Amanda leads our public services team and has 25 years of experience in digital strategy, with a decade focused on leading the design of services that have a meaningful impact on the lives of citizens, from central and local government to public health. Our guest speaker today is Brian, who is the user research lead in Sopra Steria's government consulting team. His role there involves planning, leading, and consulting on a wide variety of research projects, as well as supporting the functioning of a dedicated research team. So as usual, there'll be time at the end for questions, but please do add them to the Q&A or the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll run through as many as possible at the end. Amanda, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a really pleasure to be wrapping up the public sector, the Customer Centricity Month, talking about customers in the public sector. The webinar is going to be focusing on how using customer centricity can help you prioritize at a transformation level. And I'd like to start, because this is often the place I start when I start talking about customer centricity in the public sector, is why customer, because as we all understand, that is not often a common term used to define users of public services. So first of all, let's not get hung up on the word customer. If there's a different term that you and your organization are comfortable with, that you can define and come to an agreement, then that's great. I'm going to make a case why I believe user isn't always the most useful in the context that we're talking about, and that's that's going to come in a minute. But first, let's talk about the terms that we often associate with customer and user and citizen and patient and human and person. These are all terms about that equate to the people that we serve when we design public sector services and public sector engagement with the wider public. And I'm making the case here for the word customer centricity, or the term customer centricity, because sometimes user isn't the most effective way to define those people that we serve. One reason is it allows us to move from service level to system level. It allows us to think about users in a new context, taking them out of the service design and user-centered design sphere, which not everybody in an organization understands. It also allows us to move the conversation beyond usability. User is very grounded in what we do, and I head up a design team in which user-centered and human-centered design is a key pivotal thing, but also that can be applied at organizational level, and we want to move away from that bounding in usability. And it also allows us to prioritize and focus change across an organization. And Brian's going to do a bit of a deep dive in how we've done that in an organization. So now it's your turn. I thought I'd do a little bit of audience participation. So if we're using the people we're there to serve, as that kind of core messaging, can you think of areas in the organization where the word user isn't an effective framing of the people that you serve? So I've given you some scenarios that we've come up with, but please use the chat to share your own versions of where reframing the word user might be useful to you in your organization. So we talked about the word user and why that might not necessarily be always the most useful. And we'd now like to focus on, well, why customer? Well, the easiest way I've found to get my head around the word customer in the public sector is to come up with some scenarios. And often when I'm talking to individuals across the public sector, they'll say, well, there's no competition for public sector services. I dispute that in some ways, but yeah, let's go with that. There's no competition and there's no choice that our users have to use this service to get the thing that they need from us, or to get the service or the transaction. So I'm going to take you through a scenario and get you to think about that application in a public sector scenario, but also not exclusively. So I require a service. There's only one provider of this service, and I need to pay to use this service. I'd suggest that you start typing away and guessing what services this could be. The first one that springs to my mind is First Great Western. I live in Bristol. I travel to London quite a bit. The only way I can get to London from Bristol is on a First Great Western train. I have no choice. They have no competition. And I am a customer of theirs. But also, if I want a driving license in the UK, I have to go through the DVLA. Or if I want to have a utility in my home, I have often limited or single choice utility in the to use a choice to bring into my home. And yes, and I see some people have popped some things in the chat, like a passport. And you can think of, I'd be interested for any of the public sector organizations on the call today to also think about more private sector scenarios as well. But yes, I think if you can think, so this is a scenario where I think treating the person you're serving as a customer can have some added advantages. In scenario 2, we're going to look at that there's a semblance of choice, but no power in the final decision. Like so let me talk you through that one. So there's a big life choice that I need to make. I need to do research to make that choice. I have to apply or put forward an offer. And the final decision rests with the organization and the people that I'm dealing with. So, pop in the chat what you think that might apply to. In my head, it could be buying a house. Could be applying for a school place for your child. Could be applying for a credit card, mortgage, other financial services, a financial service product. Or it's something that I'm currently going through with one of my children, is applying for a university place. Again, pop any other scenarios that you can think of. Finally, the third scenario is membership. Joining an organization, getting accreditation, getting something. So I would like to join or engage with an organization. It could be to further my personal or career, my personal well-being or my career. And usually there's a fee involved. I need to pay a fee, one-off or ongoing. So have a think. What do you think? Where do you think those scenarios fit into? It could be you want to be a member of the Market Research Society. That's one from Brian, who is a member of the Market Research Society. You might want to be a member of one of the chartered institutes across the UK. You might want to join a gym. It could be a pilot looking to be licensed in the UK, or a seafarer gaining accreditation. Again, pop any other scenarios that you can think of in the chat. And again, keep chatting, because I think when we frame the word customer and those people that we serve, you can think of all sorts of scenarios where actually thinking about somebody as a customer, something that there is a mutual beneficial relationship of getting engaging with each other is really important. So I've talked about why not user all the time, and I've talked about why customer in certain scenarios. And then I'd like to just talk you through and introduce you to our customer centricity model. We view this model as a tool for transformation, because our research shows that mature customer-centric organizations are nimble and can react to change more quickly. They can communicate more effectively, and they have a higher employee satisfaction metric. This has all come through our research from the customer centricity model that was commissioned by Google a few years ago, and is the self-assessment tool is on our site. The model currently is very aimed at the private sector. It's very much about products and how the private sector organizations organize themselves. But we believe that it can be applied to the public sector, because the 5 core dimensions are relevant across any organization. And that is some key questions that we ask as part of this model to understand how you make decisions and prioritize in an organization. The first one being governance. How are strategic decisions being made? So one of the great things about the service design in the public sector and the government service standards is they provide a really lovely layer of governance and process that can be applicable, especially at that service level. But is your organization structured that you as a service team or you as a program team can make semi-autonomous decisions, that they trust you to make decisions because you're using evidence or you're basing it on the right thing? The next one is process. I've touched upon that a little bit. And one of the questions you might ask is, how do you decide on your priorities? What are the processes internally to make sure you're working on the right thing and making the right decisions? Next is people. A core question we ask is, where do your UCD roles sit? Are they just on service teams? Do they sit centrally? Do they have a voice or a seat at the table at your kind of most senior levels? How are you communicating, both within your teams and across? So how well do they communicate? Are they speaking the same language? Do the terms and the way we define things make sense across your organization? And finally, facilities. So are you using the right tools to get your jobs done effectively, efficiently? All of this ladders up into a maturity scale. And right at the beginning, you are quite immature as a customer-centered organization. And what we recommend at that point is focusing on awareness and commitment across your organization. It's usually one person or a small team beating the drum. They can be siloed, and you want to kind of create that culture change within your organization. And then you can move up to emerging, which is about focusing on the commitment and consistency to customer experience and customer centricity. You can then move to defined, and we find in all of our research in that we've been doing over the last few years that a lot of people sit in this kind of messy middle number 3, where you've kind of, you know what you need to do, you've got a level of commitment, but you have to focus on really defining that capability, that processes, so that you can focus on the culture and leadership and continuing moving up to the maturity scale. And finally, it's a high functioning, fully integrated part of how you center your organization. I'm going to pass to Brian now, who's going to take us through a more specific case study.
Super. Thank you, Amanda. I trust everybody can see the screen okay. Yeah, so thanks a million. As Amanda had mentioned, I'm just going to share a little bit of the work that we've done to date with the Civil Aviation Authority. We think this is just a really good example to demonstrate how the customer centricity model it can be utilized to drive organizational change. For a little bit of context, the Civil Aviation Authority, they're the UK's aviation regulator, so this means they work to ensure that the UK's aviation industry meets the highest of standards possible when it comes to safety. It obviously has a responsibility to us as consumers or customers that not only do we have choice and value for money when we choose to fly, but we are also protected and treated fairly when we do so. The focus for customer centricity, it emerged through a multitude of reasons, which can reflect the entire system within the CAA operates. So included feedback and possibly some complaints from customers, a review from the Department of Transport. The CAA is also funded by the industry, so there's a need to demonstrate effectiveness and efficiency in the work. So it felt really important to focus on customer centricity, just to ensure that they were meeting the needs of customers in the best way possible. And then finally, like a lot of sectors, new entrants have high expectations, especially when it comes to digital services and delivery and tools. And that's aligned with that ambition of becoming the 21st century regulator. It reminds me of a quote from one of the participants that we spoke with over the course of the project. And they said, you know, as a regulator, to set the standard, you have to be the standard. And that was kind of a really nice sort of summation of what we're trying to achieve over the period of time we worked with them. I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into what our aims were, how we went about it, and what the outcomes were. So what were we trying to achieve, or what was our aim? The CA was at the beginning of the journey to improve the experience for people that they interact with. So they've already set up a cross CA team to focus on improving customer experience and introduce new ways of working. Bringing in a human-centered and service design approach was kind of a new approach to them and how they worked. So it was really about working together as one team, learning by doing. So to start that off, it was about gaining a holistic view of customer experience within the organization. So these are kind of the 4 key areas that we aim to address throughout the work, just to make sure that we were getting that full picture of how the organization worked in relation to customer experience. So when we speak about culture and behavior, it's about understanding the strategic importance of customer experience. So how well the CAA are set up to deliver it, what are the culture and behaviors that are needed to improve it and drive it forward and continuously mature it. Capabilities and skills. So the roles and capabilities that the organization need to do this work, and you can already see the similarities here with the customer centricity model that Amanda mentioned when we speak about, you know, UCD roles and the people involved. So yeah, so what are the skills needed? What are the tools and trainings that people will need to support them in achieving this? Measuring and monitoring. So again, exploring how the CA might measure customer experience, and then also how they can monitor it over time. So one of the examples is that we've developed a prototype of a dashboard where you could sort of benchmark that customer centricity model and then continuously test and go back and check over time to see improvements and make changes accordingly. And then last but not least, products and services. So identifying needs, pain points, and ideas to deliver effective and easy to use products and services. So for us in this piece of work, it was kind of benchmarking with the customer centricity model and then conducting a series of pilot discoveries into different business areas to demonstrate the value of conducting research with users and customers to improve products and service delivery. So what did we do? Our approach was founded around the customer centricity model that Amanda has mentioned. As the slide shows, we worked over a period of 12 weeks, and it began with an organizational discovery of 3 weeks. This was a really key component, the center of which was that customer centricity model that we put out to the organization and asked for feedback on. And that was kind of the benchmark then that we built upon. So it was really about creating that solid foundation. And I'll not get into too much detail about the specific score, but we saw some really solid customer-centered practices within delivery. Customer insight was being used, but as Amanda mentioned, there's always that room for improvement, and maybe more customer-centered techniques that could be used, supporting efficiency, engaging with customers, and just making sure that improvements happen over time to improve that centricity rating even higher than what it was. The purpose of this initial phase was really to get that rich understanding of the organization across core business areas. So alongside the customer centricity model that I mentioned, we also did a review of existing documentation, interviewed stakeholders and different clients, and then also ran a series of customer centricity focused workshops as well. So it's really about trying to embed that customer centricity focus and mindset right from the beginning across different layers of the organization, and then moving forward as one team together. After doing that organizational discovery for the 3 weeks, it gave us then the space to run pilot discoveries. So we ran 3 pilot discoveries at the same time. These ran concurrently over a 6-week period, and we focused on 3 different business areas. The value of this was that it really gave us that space to explore the outcomes of the customer centricity model scores and the outcomes that we got from the organizational discovery. It really helped us sort of contextualize the things that we were hearing and seeing in that survey. And again, I just want to stress at this point that it's really important to note that we really worked as one team, so blending roles and specialisms between ourselves and the CAA, creating spaces for knowledge sharing, but also knowledge acting. So, working together and conducting customer experience activities together. So interviewing different staff members, holding workshops, analysing the data together, and helping to contextualise all that insight that we're coming out. And I think that was kind of a key part of the success of this engagement. As noted on the slide, we did 95 research engagements, which was quite a lot over a period of 6-week discoveries, but 44 internal stakeholder interviews. And again, these range from all different levels of the organization. So from CEOs and heads of department to contact center staff as well on the coalface. And then also 51 external customer research sessions. So again, staff working in airlines, airports, those kind of things. And also customers that have maybe booked holidays and those kind of things as well. So real sort of diverse range of engagements. That's all we're trying to build up that picture of customer centricity within the organization. After doing all that work, you can imagine then that there was a lot of consolidation needed. And when we think about prioritizing and creating that roadmap, it was really important then that we didn't let all this good work go to waste. So it was important to really focus on making solid recommendations and working together to prioritize and roadmap. So we had that 3-week consolidation phase after that. Again, as I said, just working together as one team, going over the work that was conducted in the 9 weeks previous to work out, what's the important areas to focus on and when. So what was really achieved at the end of this? So as I mentioned, we had the organizational discovery, and then we ran our 3 pilot discoveries concurrently over the 6 weeks. For each pilot discovery alone, we developed a set of customer needs, where these needs were and weren't being met within the current service or the experience, what the CA could possibly do about this, as well as the value for doing it, and our recommendation for what to do next. So again, you can kind of see where this customer centricity and prioritization were coming together. And as I mentioned, over the 12 weeks, it was really about developing those outcomes and insights. So, consolidating themes and learnings into an improving customer experience report, identifying principles to work on to develop further, including stuff like the rules required and models to show how that could work. As Amanda had mentioned as well, developing like a CX toolkit for future projects, and also considering public sector elements as well, like the GDS standards. So really just trying to evolve that CX strategy, and as I mentioned as well, developing a dashboard, because it's not a one and done thing. This is about improvement over time as well. So setting up those measurement strategies that you can see the input and impact of the changes that you're making and applying. So again, as I mentioned, from the outputs, you can see the real focus that we've put on to understanding, nurturing, and advancing customer experience within the organization. And it was really important for us not to only sort of state how that could be done, but do our best to try and show it and really demonstrate the value of it. And as I mentioned, this was all really built on that initial organizational discovery at the beginning around that customer centricity model. So just to briefly wrap up. I'm going to pass back to Amanda, who's going to go into more detail about the next steps and what happens in terms of the prioritization. But from that 12-week piece of work, we identified 17 formal recommendations, and this then became basically a backlog. So each one had the impact and effort of each one acknowledged, like I mentioned, and this allowed us then to come together as one team to plan and roadmap for follow-on activities for improving customer experience at the CA. So some of the things maybe included, alphas for technical and process solutions, continuous improvement initiatives, activities maybe that other CA teams that maybe weren't as involved in this initial 12 weeks could get involved in, further research discoveries and other areas to look in or needed to be explored further, and then other broader strategic items as well that needed to be acknowledged. On the back of this, we know that customer experience has become a board priority within the CEA, and it's really helping with their drive to become an even more customer-first organisation. I'm going to just pass back to Amanda now just to sort of discuss more with that prioritization.
Thank you, Brian. You can see my screen?
Yeah, all good.
Yes. Okay, great. I wasn't sure. Sorry. So I'm going to just wrap up by talking for a few minutes about prioritizing at that transformation level. So although a big chunk of the CAA work was aimed at the 6-week pilots where we went into the services to help learn by doing and to introduce these new ways of working to teams who had never worked this way before. We also made sure that we were laddering back up to the organization, to the cross teams, and to the board, and embedding change for the future. I'm going to revisit our maturity model again and just look at the ways that at the end of this activity, CAA specifically were able to prioritize. However, a lot of these are, a lot of these came specifically out of the research and the engagement we did, but you'll see that they should resonate across the public sector. So firstly, governance. It was really key, and it is really key for the success of this program, because the CAA have now taken all of the work that we did together and created a big business case and puts customer experience as the board priority. So that then becomes the foundation for the change and foundation for governance moving forward. We've also looked at processes, and one of the key priorities for process within CAA is around the GDS service manual and the government service standard. And that's because CAA is an arm's length body that doesn't sit on gov.uk, so they've not had to follow these processes up until now. And as part of this engagement, we were testing out to see if these ways of working, these processes could land and apply to their services and ways of working. And then this is a big priority for them to start to embed in the organization. And as anyone who's adopted these standards in the last kind of 10 to 13 years knows, that this is a journey, and they're at the very start of that. They've also looked at people, and one of the key focuses is culture. So what's been running through the program and been a key criteria is making sure the culture of the organization is aligned to customer centricity and is customer focused. So that's the first step. And then once that culture is embedded, they can start to look at capabilities and those next priorities. Communication is really key to land these messages, to land them right, and to land them centrally. So they've got a strategy in place and an internal communication hub that ensures that the messages are consistent. And finally, facilities. Brian mentioned a CX toolkit. That is a living, breathing tool that is available to all employees that introduces them to the work that they do. And this is backed up by recorded webinar sessions, formal training down the line, as well as things like lunch and learns and regular share outs of what the other teams are doing. Finally, all of these have kind of coalesced into kind of 3 key priorities for CAA moving forward, which is about keep engaging people and learn through doing, and that learn through doing is a key core cultural tenet. Anchoring the culture for CX in existing values, so it feels like evolution and not revolution, and focusing on messages that people hear and say about CX, so that they're consistent, efficient, and have a clear definition and clarity around what CX means, what customer means. And the CAA has done a lot of work internally around defining those terms, laying out in clear, easy to understand language what a customer is and why they are important. Brian and I have done a great job of running to time. I'm going to pass back to Lauren now.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. That was great. We're now going to be handing over to you guys for questions. So if you do have any, please do add them to the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of your screen now, and we'll go through them. So I can see we've had a couple through already. The first one that we've had, I think, Amanda, if I pass to you first, and then Brian, you can add anything in, but can I do the assessment myself, or do I need to do it with my team?
Let's unmute first. Yes, it's an either or both. The current customer centricity model, which is a little bit more aimed at the private sector, is up on our website, and Lauren's going to link to all of that at the end of the session. And that's a self-assessment tool designed to be done by one person. But there's a huge value in doing this with a team or with an organization. And just to talk about CAA for a second, again, is that we did that across the organization at all levels before we began the pilot sessions, to do a quick benchmarking of how people understood customer centricity and user-centered design. So it kind of covers both. That allowed us to get an aggregate score of the maturity across the organizations, but also pinpoint disparities across the team in different ways. So we definitely recommend doing it with your team, and it's a very flexible tool.
Great, thank you. The next one we've had, which Brian is kind of touching on your section about the UCAA, was how big was your team? 95 interviews is a lot of hours.
How big was the team? I can't remember exact numbers, but as I kind of mentioned, it was really a blended team. So obviously we had ourselves from the CXP, but also we had quite a few members of the CAA team joining in as well. So I think we were kind of surprised ourselves when it came out as 95 at the end of the session. It didn't feel like that going through it. So I could probably find the exact number of people involved, but as I say, we had quite a few people helping across the organization, so it didn't come across as 95 when we were doing it, thankfully.
I want to say 8 from our side between the CXPartners and Sopra Steria, Brian. And then again, like I said, that was only part of the team. We had a very engaged, very available team on CAA side as well.
Oh, nice. The next question we've had is, who is your main sponsor who had the understanding of customer centricity and responsibility for this area?
So the sponsor for this did come from a customer service, customer experience background. I believe her job title, and she might be on the webinar, so please, I apologize if I get this wrong, is service design and customer experience lead. She has a board report within that function. So has a sponsor further up within that customer experience and service design function. And CAA deliberately kind of pulled those two terms together so that they weren't separate and siloed. I hope that answers your question. Let me know if you want more detail.
Great, thank you. The next one we've got, I think it's for you, Brian, is why was the organizational discovery important to the CAA project?
Yeah, super. Apologies, Lauren, I'm having connection issues as well, so if I drop in or out, that's why. The organizational discovery was really the foundation. It was everything that we kind of built upon, as I kind of explained in the approach. But I think for us, it was, building that understanding, creating that foundation, and developing that sort of holistic picture that we could then move forward with.
Oh, I think we've just lost them.
Organization.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, should
Yeah.
we come back to that one?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So it's the organizational discovery was a key component of the methodology because we didn't want to dive into new ways of working with the 3 service teams we were working with without understanding without understanding the level of maturity, what success looked like at different levels of stakeholders, and it also enabled us to gain an understanding of how things are talked about, how things are perceived before we started speaking to people who were experts in their specific service line. So it just gave us that kind of broader version. It also allowed us to start thinking about what our final deliverables were, because the people we were speaking to in the organizational discovery were also the people we were going to be reporting back our recommendations to.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I think you've,
Sorry, Brian, I picked up for you.
No. Yeah, you nailed it, Amanda. Sorry, my connection's been really funny. But yeah, as Amanda alluded to there, yeah, it was really about engaging with those different layers of the organization as well, and seeing how it was across all the different levels, and getting that understanding and understanding like a common language as well. So yeah, it was really foundational, essentially.
Oh, fab, thank you. The next one we've had is what would you recommend if your organization is stuck before it even starts the journey, i.e. customer experience isn't a strategic priority or even understood by senior leaders?
Good question. I guess it's in the same way that yes, it's a good question. I think every organization is different, and I don't think one answer would solve everything. I we know through our engagement with the customer centricity model in other with other organizations that that's often the lever they use. So they fill it out, they get to that maturity, and then they use like all the research that we've done in the white paper to kind of back up their strategy documents and their reasons why. I think you can also within the public sector look to see if more increasingly service design teams are being asked to look at the whole picture, the end-to-end journey that often doesn't just include the digital journey or even just the single service journey. In all of those scenarios I described, it isn't just a sit down in front of a form or sit down in front of a website and engage. And I think that gives us levers as well to talk across teams. So I think going back to the question about the sponsor, is it came out of customer service and customer experience because CAA has call centers and customer service centers that really need to be part of this journey and that can't be separate from kind of service design teams. And so that allowed by building those relationships and building those that trust, and also looking at the culture and what can change or needs to change. None of those are specific examples to unlock your the person's question, but they're levers, and it's about understanding your organization. It's hard, and we've definitely hit blockers where it doesn't become a board priority, or that it's really hard to shift away from, say, tech-led decision making, as an example. And I think that learning by doing and showing by doing is often really powerful, which again is why the pilots were very much a key part of this work, that we didn't spend time at just doing central transformation. We wanted to make sure we were working with the teams and showing them the benefits of the ways of working, so that you then got the top down and the bottom up approach to it.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. The next question we've got is, well, I guess for both of you, what is for you the difference between customer experience and service design?
Brian, do you want to go first?
It's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. Actually, I don't want to give a naive answer without really thinking about it deeply. But yeah, if you've got something off the top of your head, Amanda, I'm happy to collect my thoughts.
It's definitely something I've thought about. And I think in the beginning of the webinar, I talked about that, like user is very much a service design piece. Service design is often just looking at at that one-to-one, that journey across like a particular service. Or in the private sector, you often talk about products, right? What's the difference between like a product design and customer experience? Customer experience can take a step out and often involve more teams. Like I mentioned, like customer call centers, contact centers, help desks, the frontline staff that aren't necessarily involved in the design of the service, but they're involved in the implementation or the support of it. So it's looking a little bit broader and defining that who we serve a little bit broader than, say, a strict service. They are not mutually exclusive, and I think you can't really do one well without the other. So you should be looking at both.
Sorry, my connection dropped there, but there's a good chance to see if me and Amanda are aligned on this. Because I know we've actually spoken about this, Amanda, and about the use of user in the public sector and stuff. And again, I'm a user researcher lead, so for me, it's always been user first. But I think the real value I've found in using the customer term in this case is that, especially across management layers where maybe that UCD understanding isn't as developed or isn't as familiar to people, customers a much more comfortable term for them to use, and they can gain to it. And as Amanda alluded to in the presentation as well, customer, user, human, it's kind of similar ways of explaining the same thing. And I think one of the values that we find in this is that sometimes when we maybe approach service design projects, you're looking at that journey from start to finish, which is incredibly beneficial. But when we brought in the customer lens to it, it brought in different layers of management and strategy as well from the organization that sometimes maybe as user researchers we mightn't necessarily focus on, because we do have that laser focus on the user. So it helped us bring a broader scope to our work, and consider different factors as well, and kind of build up that picture. So yeah, it really helped just sort of engage different levels of management and stuff as well across the organization, and then build from there. And as we kind of shown in the pilot discoveries, we still developed standard outputs that you would kind of expect from a service design discovery, or people would be familiar with in public sector projects, like developing customer needs or user needs and stuff as well, and following that format. So yeah, I think it was important to not get too hung up on the term customer, but trying to utilize it for best effect to have the conversations we needed to have, essentially.
Fab. Thanks, guys. So we've got another one here that's, how did the questions for the model come about?
Good question. So the original assessment tool was commissioned by Google and run across Europe with hundreds of organizations to get the first maturity assessment tool. We have been working this year within the public sector with people like the CAA to adapt that model so that it more fits how public sector organizations are organized and structured. It's really key that we use the word service. We acknowledge the the GDS service standard, and and also the kind of base maturity that some of the sector already has. So we've been adapting the existing model over this last year, which will be launched as a self-assessment tool in early 2024. And that has been done in consultation with industry. And then when we launch the tool, we'll continue to gather data, refine and iterate in order to make sure that it is a really accurate reflection of how public sector is organized.
Lovely, thank you. And I think we've got one more question, unless anyone else wants to pop anything else in the chat or the Q&A. But what if you have limited capacity or budget? What if you have limited capacity or budget? How do you choose what to prioritize?
Good question. I think a bit like what do you do when your organization is stuck before it even starts is it's again what's important to your organization. So the customer centricity tool helps you, give you a baseline. It will give you a metric, a score across all of those foundational metrics that I've talked through. That gives you a total score, but it will also give you areas where you're weaker and more strong in, so you can prioritize based on that. It was really important for the CAA to get CX as a business priority, and it was really important that the culture was embedded, the culture and ways of working were embedded. So that's why communication and governance were prioritized for them. I would say if you don't know where to prioritize, I'm going to do a shameless plug for the rest of the webinars that we've done this month. And I'd go back to Stu Taylor's webinar right at the beginning, where he talked about the different prioritization strategies organizations can adopt. And also Nicola's impact mapping, which can often give you a faraway view of where you want to get to as an organization in terms of your vision, and then allow you to roadmap a set of priorities between then and now. And as Brian very eloquently said in his case study, we used the discovery methodology to help CAA set their priorities for 2024 and beyond.
Great, thank you so much. So I think that's all the questions we've had today. So I guess we can wrap up there. But as I mentioned earlier, we've recently published a white paper with our findings from our recent study into prioritization. I'll just pop the link in the chat. Oh, thank you, Amanda. Bear with me. Yeah, so you should see that link now, and you can download the white paper from there. And also, Amanda mentioned a lot about our customer centricity study. I'm also going to pop another link in the chat so you can kind of read more about some of our work to do with customer centricity. And then finally, I just wanted to say thank you so much for today's session, Amanda and Brian. It's been so great to hear from you both. And it's been a really interesting webinar, and we've had loads of great questions, which you guys answered very well. But then also I want to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming along. As I mentioned earlier, this is our last session of the series, but we'll be writing up some blogs and sending out the recordings to all the other sessions. So do look out for those, and then feel free to kind of catch up on any that you might have missed. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Super, thank you.